The sun beat down on the cracked pavement of Fairview Avenue, casting long shadows between the towering corporate buildings that lined the street, like glass guardians of a world too proud to look down. On a corner, most pedestrians rushed past without a second glance. A small cart stood, metal, dented, but polished with care. The umbrella above it was faded red and yellow, and a handwritten chalkboard read, "Mason's Homemade Sandwiches, Made with Respect." Mason Hill, a soft-spoken black man in his early 40s, stood behind the cart with the quiet poise of someone used to being overlooked. His hands moved with precision, layering lettuce and tomatoes on freshly baked bread, wrapping each sandwich like it was a gift. Every morning at 5 a.m, he pushed that cart from a storage unit on 12th Street to this corner, 3 blocks from City Hall. Rain or shine, he didn't speak much. He didn't have to. The regulars came for the food, but they stayed for the peace he brought. Mason had once been someone else, a suit, a title, a man with an office on the 28th floor. But no one here knew that, not even the ones who nodded at him every day. And that's how he liked it, because here he was just the sandwich guy. But not everyone respected quiet strength. That morning, as Mason handed a tuna melt to a construction worker and pocketed a crumpled 10, a black SUV pulled up across the street. Sleek, shiny, government plates. 3 figures stepped out, 2 men in gray and a woman with heels sharp enough to puncture glass. Her name was Cynthia Beck, the newly appointed Deputy Commissioner of Public Aesthetics, a title as inflated as her sense of importance. She eyed Mason's cart like it was trash cluttering her vision. Her assistant whispered, "He's not on the new zoning list. The sidewalk ordinance was updated last week." Cynthia's lips curled into a smug smirk. "Good. Let's clean it up." She approached the cart with her entourage in tow, their badges gleaming. Mason looked up, wiping his hands on a towel. Their eyes met. Hers were cold, calculating. His steady, unreadable. "You don't have a permit," she said, skipping any form of greeting. "You're in violation of City Code 12-91B. You need to pack up. Now." Mason didn't flinch. He simply reached under his cart and pulled out a laminated document. "This permit is valid until the end of the quarter," he said, his voice low but clear. Cynthia barely glanced at it. "That's old. There's a new policy, effective immediately." "A policy updated last night isn't law," Mason replied. "Not until it's ratified and posted in public domain." Someone from the crowd, a lawyer-looking type in a navy coat, murmured, "He's right." But Cynthia wasn't used to being challenged. Not by men like Mason, especially not in public. She leaned in closer. "You're not welcome here. This street is being modernized, rebranded, and you don't fit the aesthetic." Mason didn't move. His silence, calm and resolute, only made her angrier. "I'm giving you 10 minutes to get off this corner, or I'll have your cart impounded and you arrested for trespassing." A hush fell over the sidewalk. A child holding a grilled cheese sandwich looked up at his mom. "Why is she yelling at the sandwich man?" Mason took a slow breath and gently closed the lid of his cooler. "I'm not moving," he said. Simple. Final. The temperature on the sidewalk dropped 10 degrees. "You're making a mistake," Cynthia snapped, her voice rising loud enough for the suits in the nearby cafe to hear. "No," Mason replied softly. "You are." And with that, he pulled out his phone, not with panic, not with anger, just a quiet, practiced grace. He typed a message and set it down on the cart. The crowd watched in growing fascination, their loyalty shifting without a word. No one knew who Mason really was. But they were about to find out. 10 minutes passed. Mason didn't move. The street, once bustling with idle chatter and honking horns, had gone eerily still. The businessman who usually scrolled through finance blogs on his morning walk had lowered his phone. A jogger paused her run, earbuds dangling. Even the barista from the corner coffee shop had stepped outside, steaming latte in hand. All eyes were on the man with the sandwich cart. Cynthia Beck, heels tapping with sharp impatience, paced like a lioness denied her hunt. She kept glancing at the time, expecting the police to arrive, expecting the crowd to disperse, expecting something. But all she got was silence. And Mason, standing still, unshaken, her assistant leaned in. "Ma'am, we're starting to draw attention, should we?" "Call enforcement," she snapped. "Now." But before he could dial, a sleek black town car rolled up beside the curb. No city markings, no government license plates. The back door opened. Up stepped a man in his early 60s, tall, silver hair, charcoal suit tailored within an inch of perfection. Gordon Lattimore, CEO of Premex Urban Development, the most powerful corporate developer in the city. A man known for swallowing neighborhoods whole and turning them into shopping plazas. His name could shake hands or shatter careers. He approached with purpose, his eyes landing not on Cynthia, but on Mason. "Mr. Hill," he said, offering a respectful nod. "I'm surprised to find you here." Cynthia froze. Her assistant blinked. "Wait, did he just say, Mr. Hill?" Mason nodded slightly. "Morning, Gordon." The crowd began to murmur. Cynthia's brow furrowed. "You know each other?" Lattimore turned to her, confused. "You don't know who this is?" She folded her arms, trying to regain control. "He's an unlicensed vendor, blocking our beautification project." Latimer's expression darkened. "That unlicensed vendor is Mason Hill, former chief of ethics at Hartwell and Royce, and the founder of the Urban Renewal Trust, the nonprofit that helped fund the very revitalization you're standing on." The words hit harder than a slap. Cynthia stared at Mason, blinking. "That's impossible. He's just a food vendor." A boy's voice cut through the tension. "He's the sandwich guy." The child's innocent defense only deepened the weight of the moment. Mason spoke for the first time since Lattimore arrived. "I stepped away from titles, from suits, from meetings where people like you," his gaze resting on Cynthia, "decide what belongs and who doesn't. I came here because I believe change should be seen, not spoken, felt, not branded, served, not sold." The businessman from earlier let out a low, impressed whistle. The jogger clapped once. Others followed. Cynthia flushed with fury, but Lattimore held up a hand. "Miss Beck," he said calmly, "Mr. Hill is the reason this entire district avoided a hostile takeover last year. He's the reason we're even able to build anything in this city without community revolt. But he doesn't even have a permit," she stammered. Mason reached into his cart again and pulled out a folder. Inside were zoning rights, grandfathered ordinances, and to everyone's surprise, a signed contract bearing Cynthia's own signature, dated a year prior when she worked in the Parks Department. "Ironic," Mason said quietly. "You approved this yourself." Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through trees. Cynthia stepped back, shaken. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake," Mason replied. "Just a memory problem. You forgot my name the moment I wasn't wearing a suit." Silence. Then the businessman spoke. "You really thought you could erase a man just because he didn't look like he owned the street?" Cynthia's face paled. Lattimore, hands clasped, turned to Mason. "What do you want to do?" Mason looked out at the crowd, then back at Cynthia. "I want her to do what I've done every day for 3 years on this corner, serve the people." He stepped aside and pointed to the cart. "1 hour, right here. You serve everyone who lines up, free of charge. No camera crews, no PR spin. Just you, the people, and the sandwiches." Cynthia's mouth dropped open. "I'm not." "You slapped down dignity today," Mason interrupted. "Now you get a chance to pick it back up, with your own hands." A tense beat passed. And then Lattimore, the most powerful man on the block, turned to Cynthia and said, "I suggest you listen." Cynthia Beck had never worn an apron in her life. But now, standing behind Mason's humble cart with latex gloves on her hands and the scent of grilled cheese in the air, she looked like a fish flung from marble floors into muddy waters. Her expression was tight, her jaw clenched, but her eyes darted nervously to the gathering crowd. The line stretched down the block: construction workers, street cleaners, business execs in tailored suits, homeless men pushing carts of their own, curious onlookers with phones out, recording everything, not out of malice, but fascination. And Mason? He stood quietly beside her, folding napkins with the same patience he had shown all morning. "Start with something simple," he said gently. "Turkey and cheddar, toasted, lettuce, light mayo." Cynthia hesitated, then reached for the bread. "Don't squeeze it," he added softly, nodding toward the loaf. "Let the blade do the work." The crowd chuckled. Her face flushed, but she obeyed. The first customer was a sanitation worker named Terrence. Big guy, soft eyes. He stepped up with a warm grin. "I usually come here 'cause this man makes sandwiches like he respects my mama," he said, gesturing toward Mason. "Let's see how you do." Cynthia didn't respond. She handed him the sandwich with trembling hands. Terrence took a bite, nodded, then whispered, "Still not as good." The crowd laughed, but it wasn't cruel. It was warm. Alive. For the first time, something cracked behind Cynthia's carefully curated armor. She turned to Mason. "Why are you doing this?" He looked at her, then at the faces waiting in line. "Because you forgot what it means to serve," he said. "And I believe in reminders that come with mustard." As the hour wore on, the sweat began to beat at Cynthia's hairline. Her shoes pinched. Her voice softened. She began greeting customers by name, some shyly, some awkwardly, but the effort was there. A woman in a business suit stepped up and said, "You're the same one who tried to kick him off the street, right?" Cynthia nodded silently. The woman handed her a 20. "Then you'd better make me something with love." Cynthia blinked. For a moment, something stirred in her. The sharp sting of public accountability mixing with the strange warmth of human connection. And then came the man in rags. He shuffled to the front of the line, his shoes more duct tape than leather, beard scraggly, eyes tired. The kind of man Cynthia used to pretend not to see. Mason leaned in. "This is Daryl. He likes it warm, but not hot. No mayo, extra tomato." Cynthia stared. "You know what he likes?" "I know all of them," Mason replied, "because I see them." She made the sandwich in silence, handed it over. Daryl looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "Thank you." Not as a transaction, not as a customer, just as a man. And Cynthia's hands shook slightly as she turned away. The hour ended. Mason stepped forward, took off his gloves, and nodded toward the cart. "You did it." She didn't say anything at first, just stared at her hands, at the crumbs on her palms, at the little streak of mustard near her watch. Then she whispered, "I forgot what this feels like." Mason gave her a small nod. "It's easy to forget people when you only see policies." Cynthia looked up, and her voice cracked. "I didn't mean to become this person." He didn't scold her, didn't shame her, just offered a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. "Then don't be her anymore." She took it. And for the first time in years, she sat on a city bench, beside a man she had nearly erased, and ate in silence, a quiet rebirth. Across the street, nestled behind a rack of electric scooters, a camera lens zoomed in. Cale Rivera, an independent documentarian with a gift for finding stories hidden in plain sight, had been filming since the first shout echoed across Fairview Avenue. He hadn't come for drama, he came for truth, but sometimes the two collided. He captured everything: Cynthia's confrontation, Mason's silence, the line stretching into the sun. And now, as she sat beside Mason eating a sandwich like a penitent apprentice, Cale whispered to himself, "This is it." Later that afternoon, the footage hit the internet. The thumbnail alone was viral bait. She tried to evict a street vendor. What happened next shocked the whole city. By sunset, it had 1 million views. People weren't just watching. They were commenting, sharing, debating. Some shouted, "Justice." Others questioned, How could someone so powerful be so blind? And many simply said, I've seen this before. I've lived this before. The video spread like wildfire. News anchors scrambled to report it. Headlines spun fast. Vendor becomes voice of the voiceless. City official humbled by street justice. The sandwich stand that stopped the system. But Mason? He didn't post, didn't tweet, didn't bask in the glory. He simply returned to the same corner the next morning at 5 a.m. card in hand. But this time, there were cameras waiting. Microphones, reporters shouting his name, producers offering him guest spots, even a talent scout waving a business card. He ignored them all. Instead, he turned to the first customer in line, a janitor named Reggie, who always wore a Mets cap and tipped with quarters, and asked, "Turkey or ham today, my friend?" The cameras didn't know what to do with that. But one did. Cale. He approached quietly, respectfully. "I'm not here to exploit this," he said. "I want to tell the story the way it happened. No cuts, no edits, just truth." Mason studied him. "Why me?" "Because your silence spoke louder than every scream I've ever filmed," Cale replied. Mason didn't say yes, but he didn't say no, and that was enough. 3 days later, Mason Hill walked into a room he thought he'd left behind forever. The boardroom on the 48th floor of the Premax Urban Development Tower was as cold and sharp as ever, all glass edges and marble polish. The chairs looked like they cost more than his entire cart setup. The air smelled of leather, money, and manipulation. But this time, he wasn't the one wearing the suit. Gordon Lattimore stood at the head of the table, surrounded by a cluster of advisors, attorneys, and PR experts. Every one of them wore polite smiles laced with concern. "Mr. Hill," Gordon said, nodding. "Thank you for agreeing to come. We have a proposal." Mason stayed standing. He didn't need their leather chairs or fancy coffee. Gordon continued. "We want to offer you a strategic role, Director of Community Engagement, 6 figures, full staff, media presence. We'll rebrand the street corner, build a franchise. Mason's Sandwiches could be the face of our new initiative, Food with Integrity." Silence followed. Mason slowly looked around the room. "You want to turn what happened into a product?" One of the board members leaned forward. "With your image, we could open 20 carts in a month. Set up donation partnerships. Leverage the story. Make something scalable." That word echoed like an insult. Mason's gaze settled on Gordon. "You're not interested in fixing the system. You're interested in profiting from the fact that I survived it." Gordon raised his hands. "We're offering you a platform." "No," Mason replied. "You're offering me a stage." He stepped closer, calm but firm. "I didn't stay on that corner for 3 years because I wanted attention. I stayed because that's where people like me exist. Out of sight, out of comfort, out of mind. And you didn't care until the cameras rolled." A woman from legal interrupted, her voice clipped. "Mr. Hill, if we don't act now, we'll lose public control of the narrative." Mason smiled faintly. "You already did." He turned toward the door. "I won't be your PR redemption. I won't trade my integrity for a hashtag." As he reached the exit, Gordon called out, frustration rising. "Then what do you want, Mason?" He paused, and without turning back said, "I want you to remember what it felt like when your kingdom bowed to a sandwich cart." Then he walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. And in that moment, the power in the room shifted, permanently. That night, the city glowed with the kind of neon that couldn't wash away the shadows. Mason didn't go home. Instead, he walked through the back alleys behind his regular route, past dumpsters and broken pallets, past forgotten murals half covered in graffiti, and past people whose names never trended. A woman in a tattered hoodie sat by a steam vent, arms wrapped around her knees, face hidden by her matted curls. Mason paused, reached into his satchel. He pulled out a sandwich, still warm, turkey, no mayo. "Extra lettuce," he said gently, crouching down. The woman didn't look up at first. But then she lifted her face. It was Cynthia. Bruised by the week, not physically, but deeply. No heels, no entourage. Just her, stripped of title, reputation, and pride. Mason didn't flinch. He offered the sandwich anyway. She took it, slowly. "I resigned today," she whispered. "It wasn't a firing. It wasn't noble. I just couldn't pretend anymore." He sat beside her. They ate in silence. Then she spoke again. "How did you keep going when everything was taken?" Mason stared at the brick wall in front of them, steam curling from the vent like breath in winter. "Because I never believed the world owed me kindness," he said softly. "But I never stopped believing I could give it." Cynthia turned to him. "And what do I do now?" He looked at her, his eyes gentle, unwavering. "You start where all change starts, on the ground." She let the sandwich rest in her lap. Her lip trembled. "I thought I was building a city." "You were building a wall," he said, "but walls fall." Tears slid down her cheeks, and for once, she didn't wipe them away. He stood up, brushed off his coat. "You're not broken. You're cracked open. Now you choose what grows from it." Then he walked off into the steam, leaving her there, not alone, but finally awake. The following morning, the city awoke to something it hadn't expected. Not another viral video, not a protest, not a lawsuit, but a movement, quiet, scattered, and unstoppable. Across Fairview Avenue, sandwich carts began popping up, not just Masons, but others. Vendors who'd once been pushed into alleyways now stood proudly on corners. Each cart bore a sticker, "Respect is served here." Cynthia had made copies herself. She walked street to street, handing them out. No cameras, no press. Just her and a backpack full of decals and apologies. She didn't beg for redemption. She earned it. One conversation at a time. Meanwhile, Cal's documentary, now titled "The Man with the Cart," was selected for international festivals. But more importantly, it was played in classrooms, boardrooms, and even on city buses. One scene hit hardest. Mason, in the early hours of dawn, quietly setting up his cart with the kind of reverence most people reserve for cathedrals. A child's voice narrated over the footage. It was the little boy from the crowd that day. His voice soft, recorded from home. He didn't yell. He didn't fight. He just stayed. And that made them listen. The world listened. Universities invited Mason to speak. He declined. News anchors begged him for interviews. He ignored them. His message wasn't in words. It was in sandwiches, in presence, in the way he handed food to a man who hadn't been called "sir" in a decade. But the silence wouldn't last forever. Because one morning, Mason arrived at his corner and found a letter taped to his cart. No name, just a seal. He opened it. His eyes scanned the first line, and then he froze. The city had passed Ordinance 22, a proposal to eliminate all unlicensed street vendors from the downtown district. Overnight, signed, stamped, effective immediately. They were trying again, and this time, they came with paperwork. By sunrise, Fairview Avenue was a battlefield, not of fists or fire, but of silence and presence. Dozens of carts lined the street. Vendors who once kept their heads down now stood tall. People who had never met Mason stood beside him like they'd known him forever. The city had passed a law in the dark, but Mason had already lit a match that couldn't be put out. He stood behind his cart, apron crisp, eyes focused. No fear, no anger, just resolve. Across the street, city enforcement vehicles arrived, flashing lights, uniformed officers, and a clipboard-toting official trying to keep pace with orders from above. They didn't come alone. Cynthia Beck was there. Not as an enforcer, not as an official, but as a witness. She stood between the line of officers and the carts, clipboard in hand, except this time. It was filled with signatures, thousands. A petition to reverse Ordinance 22 she'd been collecting them for days. The lead officer, confused, asked, "Are you still with the city?" "No," she replied. I'm with the people now. Cale stood off to the side, camera in hand, documenting everything, but not for a documentary. This footage would never be sold. It was for history. The city official stepped forward, holding the enforcement order. Mason Hill, he said, voice sharp. You are in violation of Municipal Code 22A. You must remove your cart or face legal action. Mason didn't move. The official tried again. This is your final warning. And Mason finally spoke. Loud enough for every camera, every mic, every watching soul to hear. I am not the one out of line. You are. He stepped from behind the cart, holding up an envelope. Inside, this is my ownership deed. This sidewalk, this square, this ground beneath our feet, was donated to the city by my foundation 5 years ago for public service. With a clause, he opened the envelope, pulled out the papers. The clause reads, no policy may override the community's right to gather, serve, or be served upon this land under penalty of breach. Gasps spread like wildfire. Cale zoomed in. Cynthia smiled through tears. And the officer took a stunned step back. The official stammered, we didn't know. Mason lowered the paper. That's the problem, he said. You make laws without knowing the people they hurt. The crowd erupted, not in riot, but in applause. In unity. In something deeper than protest. Presence with purpose. The official turned away, making a hurried call. The officers backed off. And the carts? They stayed. That night, Mason was invited to speak on every major network. He declined. Instead, he wrote a single post. Just one sentence. They tried to move the cart. Instead, the city moved. Weeks later, Mason's Corner was declared a landmark. But no statue was built, no plaque installed. Just a wooden bench with a hand-painted sign overhead. Respect is served here. And on quiet mornings, before the rush and the traffic, a man in a clean apron still arrives with a dented metal cart, serving sandwiches and dignity, one person at a time. Because the greatest revolutions don't come from shouting. They come from staying.